Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start getting set up here before we get Miss Saundra Boyd on. Okay, so in the interest of those who will have a replay of this talk series, this is a talk series under Well Caregiver Wednesday, in which we normally discuss mental health, family, caregiver, health, and wellness. So there are tips here that we share. There are resources for caregivers to put their own mental health and their own self care as a priority. And so this talk series is new for 2021 because we will actually be bringing on other caregivers, mental health professionals, medical doctors, researchers, which I'm very excited about, and just a host of things. Not just it won't just be about the serious stuff like our self care and the things we need to take care of for ourselves, but it will actually be also the good stuff that we like nutrition, food and nutrition, fun, working out, and reconnecting with ourselves. So that's the whole goal of Well Caregiver Wednesday talk series. And I'm hoping that it will be a resource for the caregivers who come here. As I mentioned yesterday in a post that I had, that I posted, was it yesterday? I mentioned earlier, over the weekend, I think it was. But I mentioned how important it is for, me to understand that caregivers aren't only mental health caregivers, can be any caregiver that's caring for a loved one with a long-term illness. And so if that caregiver is, assisting a loved one and their daily, duties and care of themselves, then it's important that, we understand, or that I understand when I'm talking to the caregivers, that can apply to those caregivers too, because long-term illness can have an effect on, an individual's mental health and the caregiver who's caring for them. And so I'm going to give a little time here for Sandra to come in. Oh, there she is. There she There you are.
Let me try to get this situated. I don't
Okay, go
have.
ahead. That's what I'm doing too, because
Okay.
I didn't see you there at first. Oh, okay. I'm going to have to sit up a little more. Let me see. I may have to bring you down a little bit here. There we go. I'll bring you here. That way you can see me. I was just doing the setup for the people who come in and replay later.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
guess let's see, we have 3 minutes before we actually can need to start and before the scheduled time. But I just wanted to give a nod to today being a very historical day
Yep.
with the
For both of us.
inauguration.
Yeah. And for the whole world.
Yes, the whole world.
You chose a good day.
Yes, it was just very refreshing to see that leaf turned over. So I'm looking forward to it. One of the things I was excited about too is during her campaign for presidency, Kamala Harris, one of the things she mentioned was caregiving. And
Mm-hmm.
her mom had a long-term illness. I'm not sure. I don't remember what it was, but I know there was some personal experiences that she shared. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited about what that could mean for us caregivers in terms of policy and laws and upgrades and changes in the healthcare system.
Right. Right.
I just put a little buffer for me in the background because I have my dogs outside, and so they bark, and I didn't want to have it be a distraction.
So you are recording this then?
Yes, and I'll
Oh,
also send you a copy. I'll send a I can either email it to you or send it to you on here on the DM within IG.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think my daughter's on. Sorry, Chris, I didn't know that.
Huh?
I think my daughter's on here. I was just telling her, sorry, I didn't know that because I was telling her to try to record it because I didn't know if you were recording.
Yes, I'm going to keep it for live. At the end, they give you the option of downloading it and then also posting it. And I always do both.
Oh, okay.
Let me see something. I'm trying to see if I can see you clearly on the uh, on my live on my other phone because it's having it has you a little jumbled pixelated on your end.
Okay. I'm opening a window to see if that helps.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there we go. Okay, we could go ahead and get started, Saundra, if you'd like. Um, One of the reasons I wanted to do this talk series is because during my time as, you know, beginning and just getting started as a caregiver, there wasn't a lot of, you know, talk or chat or even recognition about us as caregivers out here. Um, Let me see. Yeah, you want to go out and come back in? And then we see if we can get your clear.
Is it still not clear?
There it goes. There you go. It's coming in now. Okay, now you're there. Okay, there you are.
All right.
Okay. And so one of the reasons I did this talk series is because when I became a caregiver, um, there was no real resources out there for me. Nothing to really give me guidance on how to take care of myself, you know, how to be there for my loved one. Um, just the tools that would have made, you know, that the journey a little easier. And so
Right.
the whole point in this talk series is to give tools to other caregivers, from mental health professionals, from doctors, therapists, physical therapists, and researchers, and just whatever amount of resources I can pass on to the caregivers. So I do really want to thank you and appreciate you, let you know how much I appreciate you for being here. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read your bio before I ask you any questions. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Okay. Where are you? Okay. Okay. Sorry about that.
No problem.
It's taking its time. Okay. As a leader and founder of Caregivers Haven, I have devoted most of and I'm reading your bio. I have devoted
Okay.
most of my life to reaching out to others being challenged with the responsibility of providing care for those with a mental health diagnosis and other chronic illnesses. I share my lived experiences by providing education, support, and resources for other family caregivers who are stressed, scared, exhausted, and don't know where to go for help. My goal is to empower family caregivers to care for their loved ones and to utilize self care strategies. Professionally, I've worked as a registered nurse for 18 years, caring for others, but really I've been a caregiver since the age of 10, when my mom suffered a traumatic brain injury. Throughout that time, I found myself in the role of caregiver to several family members who have mental illness diagnosis, and I share my experience and knowledge through seminars, via a podcast, and using my toolbox guide. As a lifetime caregiver, wife, mother, grandmother, daughter, and sibling, auntie, and registered nurse, I'm committed to sharing my compassion for people by supporting them in their caregiving journey. I want to say thank you very much for your service to your loved ones. It's a very noble act as a caregiver to step in and fill in the gaps where care can, fail. So the first question I have for you is, are you a full-time or part-time caregiver?
Okay, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I have a compassion, for helping people. I just want to help people, and I know that a lot of people are struggling. Just as you said a few minutes ago, that when everything happened with you, you didn't know what to do. Right. So a little bit about my bio. I've been a nurse 38 years, not 18 years.
Okay.
I'm not that young. But I say I'm a lifetime caregiver because as I said in my bio, my mom had she was in a car accident and had a traumatic brain injury 50 something years ago. So my siblings and I actually, my father died around that time. It was crazy. So we actually became her caregivers because she developed a seizure disorder along with a brain injury. And so, and I was the oldest. So we've been caregivers most of our life. I had a lot of responsibility being the oldest. And so we just kind of tag teamed that. She lives 60 miles away from me. So I've spent many years running up and down the freeway. So I'm not her primary caregiver right now. My sister lives with her, and then my brother helps with all of her doctor appointments and medication management and all that. But I am a full-time primary caregiver for another loved one who I take care of on a daily basis, who lives here with me. So caregiving all around. My husband has a cousin who had a traumatic brain injury who he helps. So we have a lot of experience in caregiving.
And the long distance caregiving too then comes into play with the travel back and forth. But it's great that you do have a good amount of support. That's really good. A lot of caregivers find themselves lacking in the area of family and friends that will support them.
Right.
My second question to you is, do you have, you've already answered that one. Do you have support from family and friends? So
well, you can say a little bit more about that if you want. It's
okay.
Like support. So like I said, with my mom, my siblings were all a team and we helped, and here at home too. And so I just want to say that we have help and we kind of split the duties, and it's kind of interesting because right now I'm going to be having some checklists that will be coming out because I'm trying to help family members do that ahead of time, because for us, it was not planned. It was just kind of like all this stuff needs to be done, so whoever can get it done, get it done. And it's interesting because it kind of the duties kind of automatically get split to where everyone's strengths are. So even though you don't say you're going to do this and you're going to be in charge of this, it just kind of evolves into that. At least that's how it has happened here. Right. So I'm trying to help family members kind of think about that ahead of time. And same thing with my family. When we were growing up, no one ever said, oh, well, mom has a seizure, you do this, you do that. My baby sister recently, was reminding me, no one ever told her, you're the one who go get help, because we had a neighbor across the street who was a nurse. No one ever said that, but she said she just knew that it was her who would run across the street and, and get help. So it was like, if you have help, it's good to assign the duties if you can, but but like I said, here at home, it's just like everyone, it just kind of evolved and everyone just helps wherever they can. Even my children who don't live at home, everyone kind of knows what needs to happen, what they need to do or how to help.
Right. I think you brought up a very good point too when you mentioned how at a young age you guys were caregivers, because that's not something people want to talk about a lot openly. How many young caregivers? I actually did a series on that. I think it was probably in 2017, 2018, of the amount of young caregivers there are, youth caregivers. And then something I'm taking notes because I love to learn from others as well. And something
Mm-hmm.
I picked up from what you said is assigning duties according to the strengths.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes we get upset, in my role of caregiving, it was me and my husband. And then sometimes our young daughter would step in and help out. And so that was our team. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it was like, well, whatever everyone else couldn't do, I filled in that gap. And I had to get to a point where I was comfortable asking, my husband, I'm going to need you to learn how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to learn how to back me up and give me a break so I can do that. And so I think that's a great point for caregivers, is understanding the importance of being vocal about what our needs are in terms of support, because where we may fail and, it may not be a strength for us, it could be a strength for another family member. So I like that point that you made there. My next question would be, how do you practice self care and prioritize your well-being while caring?
I wish I could say I'm the perfect person who does that. So, I wish I had learned about this earlier. And I guess I could have if I had listened. My grandmother told me years ago, my grandmother passed away, but she told me years ago, you're doing too much. You need to rest. You're working too much. And I didn't listen. I just kept moving forward. And I had another friend by the name of Anisha. She used to always say that. She goes, God to put you on your back if you don't get enough rest and you're just
Right.
doing too much. And so for years and years, I just kept pushing myself. And it probably wasn't until one of my sisters is a Reiki coach. She's at the Reiki coach. She, with Reiki, they're all about, calm and meditation, all that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I started learning from her. And also my brother is really, he always talks about health and taking care of yourself. And even though I'm a nurse and I know how to take care of myself, a lot of nurses tend to be, I was an ICU nurse my whole career. We tend to
Oh,
be just like A type, go, 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 go personalities. And if you're not careful, that can be detrimental to your health. It's
mhm.
not always good to be that way. And so self-care has been pretty new to me. But now that I know about it, it is a priority for me. I'm learning every day. Even my daughter Kelly is always talking to me about different things I need to do. So the way that I practice self-care is I do yoga, I meditate. I start the morning with a devotion, which is awesome for me. It may not seem like a big deal, but because as a nurse, like I would have to get up at 5 a.m. and be ready to work at 7. And so there wasn't always time to have my quiet time. And so
Right.
I just really cherish that right now. So I have 2 devotionals that I read from, and then I read scripture and I pray. And that's been really great for me. The other thing I do, I'm a Southern California girl, so I go to the beach whenever I can. I love,
I miss
I
that.
love the beach. Yeah, I love the beach. That's my place to go and just rest and just, sometimes I get in the water and play like a big kid. Sometimes I just sit and I literally just stare. And sometimes we go to the beach at nighttime and I just lay back and stare at the stars. It's very calming for me. Just like when you listen to meditations, when you're hearing the waves crash and stuff, like, I'm there and it
Right
just,
there.
yeah, that's my big thing. And I think the biggest thing as far as self-care is learning how to say no. And
Yes.
me and my husband both help people a lot, and we both say yes way too much. And I am learning to protect my energy level, protect my time.
Woo.
The other day, someone asked me to do something, and I looked at my calendar, and I was free at that time. But even though there was even though I was free at that time, I was working on a project and it was a lot going on. And so I'm learning to understand that even though that specific time slot was free, I may not be free in here to, to take on
That's
something
a
else.
good point.
And that's a big lesson learned for me. It's something that, I'm just, I'm really learning to deal with. It's like a big lesson that I need to learn, or
Yeah.
that I'm learning.
Right. It takes time, and as I mentioned early on, for me, coming into caregiving, there for many of us. I mean, the many caregivers that I've met in the emergency room, the hospital, and mental health appointments, we are tossed in. It just 1 minute you're a caregiver, you know, and so we really learn to adapt to the challenges we face on the fly, you know,
Right.
and so the amount of stress level increases because you don't know what you don't know yet until it
Right.
happens, and then you
Right.
say, well, okay, so what do I do? But I do love that. What I took away from what you said that was really huge for me. I like it that you said the time slot may be free, but am I mentally available?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
like that because that was one of my challenges I had. You know,
Right.
the fear of saying no,
Right.
the fear of not owning my own space and looking at my calendar and saying, you know what, I do have some free time, but I need to take that for me. So I like that. That was a
Yeah.
good point. My
I
next,
see
go
there's
ahead.
a comment on here that said it's actually my daughter. She says boundaries equal self-care. And
Yes.
that's what she's always she's always like, Mom, she talks to me about that a lot. I'm the oldest, I'm the mama, but I'm learning a lot from her.
Me too. Is she a millennial?
Yes.
Yes. Those millennials are powerful.
Hmm.
They are changing. I have millennials, and then I have the Z, Generation Z. And they
Mm-hmm.
are all about prioritizing self-care. They're a whole new generation, a
Yes.
whole new breed of awareness.
Yes.
Yes. And I forget to look at the comments. I get so focused. Let me look back in and see if I have
Um,
comments that I may have missed. Okay. Thank you for catching that one too.
mhm.
My next question to you would be, what advice would you give to new caregivers about practicing their self-care?
um, I think one of the biggest things that I've had several discussions about this, and I would say to understand that self-love is part of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that, I had a talk with a friend of mine, Alicia Brown, and I hadn't talked to her for years, and then we were on the phone for I don't know how long, over an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And she was saying that in the Bible, there's a scripture that says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." And
Mm-hmm.
she says, you hear people all the time say, "Love your neighbor, love your neighbor, love your neighbor," but there's actually a second part to that scripture, "Love yourself," which is really the first part that you're supposed to be doing. You're
Right.
supposed to, you're supposed to love yourself as you love your neighbor. And I brought that up. She brought that up, and I told her, I said, "That's so weird. That goes along with something I've been thinking about, which is being humble and having humility." We're taught that in church. Don't be boastful, be humble,
Right.
have humility. But I think we learn about it in the wrong way, because a lot of times when we learn about it in that way, we're so busy being humble that then we forget to love. We forget that it's okay to love ourselves. It's okay to be proud of our accomplishments. It's okay to take care of yourself, because
Right.
because we were taught about it, like we weren't taught the right way. And so I think
Sacrificing.
we need to get back to that, to get back to self-love. I had a year ago, I got a email from one of my professors, and she said she was asking me for help with one of her students. And I said, I just retired, so I can't help you, but I can hook you up with someone who can help you. And she said, okay, I'm going to introduce her to you on this email. And so she sends this email, and she says, "Hi, I just want to introduce you to Saundra. She's this. She's a national conference speaker. She's a this." And so I looked at it and I was like, why is she writing all this stuff about me like that? Like, I was like, And then I thought about it and I was like, well, I have done all those things. It was so
Right.
weird. Like I couldn't accept or be proud of myself. And I think that it all comes back to, being humble, not,
Humble.
not loving ourselves as to love our neighbor. I think that's where there's so much of this imposter syndrome going on that you hear about. And
Right.
I think it's because we have forgotten or we never learned how to practice self-love. And I think when you love yourself, then protecting your energy, protecting your time, all of those things will come much easier when you're loving yourself. And so when you love yourself and practice self-care, this is what I want the caregivers, other caregivers to hear. When we do that, instead of taking care of our loved one, being tired and exhausted and frustrated,
Right.
we will be able to take care of them, giving them our best, giving them the whole us, because we are practicing self-care. We are
Right.
taking care of ourselves mentally, spiritually, physically, and emotionally, and then we can be better caregivers. So I think my message to caregivers is for real, practice self-care and know that self-love is part of that self-care.
Right. And I like that you mentioned, how I think I try not to speak so often because I still struggle with, um, generalizing, because not all Black experiences are the same. But culturally, more often than not that I've witnessed, it's a badge of honor. Self-sacrifice becomes a badge of honor. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in our homes, in our workplace, in our volunteering. And it took me some time, during my caregiving journey too, to learn self-love. And that's hard because you automatically think, oh well, I have self-love. I get up in the morning, I feed myself, I take my supplements, I do my hair. We think of self-love in a physical form, right? And I don't think we give enough weight to self-love of our whole being, right? And so when
Right.
you mention being humble and having humility, and it's okay to love ourselves, I think that is the greatest lesson I got out of caregiving, the
Mm-hmm.
importance of self-love. So I like that you made that point about self-love, because it's true. We will, pour out until we're empty. And then we really can't offer a quality of care or quality of support, because then you're walking more into the lane of resentment and not feeling good about taking care of your loved one. So I like that the self-love um, element of for the new caregivers, to work on the self-love part of their journey too. What would you like to see change in healthcare for yourself and for your loved one, if anything?
Okay, well, I think before I talk about what I would like to see changed, I do want to say that I'm really grateful for caregivers being acknowledged more now.
Yeah.
There are so many organizations and national organizations and
Mhm.
support groups and things that people are like, oh, they need some help.
Mhm.
At least we are being acknowledged. So I am grateful for that. I think it needs to be a little bit more as far as I think our healthcare system needs to help out a little bit more as far as providing education and more education and resources ongoing. Because you go to the doctor or you get discharged from the hospital and they give you like all your little papers. Half the time people don't read those papers, and
Right.
a lot of times people don't. There's no follow up, and so people get lost. So I would like to see more, but I am grateful for what they're doing for caregivers.
Me too.
I think. Um, I think one of the things I would like to see changed is I would like to see mental health and mental illness included in high school curriculum.
Yes.
I think that is greatly needed. I'm excited because I saw on NAMI California. NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. For those of you who don't know, I did see on their Instagram the other day that they are. I think there's some legislature coming up. They are like pushing for that, but I
Hmm.
think that it's very important for that. One of the arguments is that why include it in the curriculum, because there is such a short, I mean, not short, there's such a small percentage of kids who are going to get mental illness, so why include it in the curriculum? But my argument to that is, okay, there's a small percentage of them who themselves might not get it, but what about their sister? What about their brother? What about their cousin? What about one of their parents? You know, there are other people who may get it where if they knew about it and understood it and had education about it, then they will be able to help them sooner. You know, it's not, maybe a small percentage may get a diagnosis, but it's all around us. You know, the stigma about mental illness, but when you start talking to people, almost everybody has somebody in their family who has mental illness. And so I think it would help decrease stigma, and I think the education would help catch people in their illness earlier so that they can get help earlier. And not just in the high school curriculum for the students, but also for the parents. I think it needs to be taught in PTA meetings or whatever other meetings they have for the parents during those high school years. Because most of the time when parents, I mean, a lot of people, most of the severe mental illnesses happen during high school or early adulthood. And so most of the time the parents are just like, what the heck is this? What the heck just happened? Or the kids get labeled as, oh, they're just bad. They just don't like school. They're not smart. When they're struggling, there's a problem here. And so if people are educated on that for us to catch it early, that would help. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but that's like no, a big thing.
I really agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah. So that's the first thing. The second thing would be, let's see, I think I mentioned this, is well, I guess the last thing is actually something that's near and dear to your heart. We talked about this. So the last thing that I would say that I would see change is increased residential housing for people with a mental illness. That is huge. Increased housing, and for me, the two things go together. Increased housing, and then some sort of I don't know, a registry, a log, a database of something, of companies who are willing to hire someone with a mental illness. Because, you know, we would need they would need, the employer would need to they would need to be educated on mental illness. They need to understand it. And they would need to know that they need like a calm environment. But I think a lot of people have recovery and they get to the point where maybe they're ready to go out and work, but there's not a lot of places that are safe for them to go. And so so those two things are big for me, you know, more residential housing and some type of a database or something for jobs for people. I see she's saying schools must be a resource. Absolutely. Yes. So I think those are the big changes that I think I would like to see happen.
Right. I like that she's also saying more effective emergency mental health responders. I love that too.
Yeah. And that's true. And I don't know, Kelly, I don't know if you know, but we do have a national number. I think it's going to be 988. There's a national number that is going to be available to where if someone is having a psychiatric emergency or mental health emergency, they would call that number versus 911. And then they're supposed to be able to send out, the responders are supposed to be people who are educated on handling a mental illness. Now, the problem is, I know in the community that we live in, there's a crisis intervention team and it's a group of police officers who have been trained. The problem is there aren't enough of them. So I don't know how this so I don't know how this national phone number is going to work because I mean it's awesome to have, but you're also going to need
the numbers,
the people too.
Yes. The what you touched on, a lot of things that I'm also passionate about, that being mental health and mental illness being taught at the high school level. We have the mental health first aid, and I really feel like that program could be modified to train high schoolers on how to respond to friends or loved ones who are in mental health crises. Mentioned giving them information on what that looks like. I remember the first time I took a mental health training, it really gave me a heart for people, especially people who are experiencing psychosis. And so
Mm-hmm.
it helped me to understand how to be more empathetic. And I think that's part of what we're going to be needing in order to erase and get rid of the stigmas behind mental illness, so that people understand that this is a health issue, you know.
Right.
And so one of the things my daughter and I did, me and you talked about it, is on the school district here in our city. We were able to sit with one of the special programs department directors after we had a drug assembly, and I brought up that there's an issue with the children in the community using, you know, methamphetamines, and that they are self-medicating because there are other issues potentially, and we need to be looking at that as a health issue versus a behavioral issue.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to, after years of both of us being on the committee, then now have a school psychologist in the school, a therapist, and then there was a alternative school that we have that they were able to stop redirecting our young people into the police hands, you know, sending them to the police departments. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just important, not just for the students, as you mentioned, but for the parents, so that the parents know how to respond. I think it's important the teachers get some bit of training for mental health response. Um, oh, okay. Hi. For a mental health response, but I think having more, you know, insight and teaching emotional IQ when it comes to someone who's in a mental health crisis is important. And so, yeah, I really think the number, I'll have to look more at the national number, the 988 number, because that's going to be really a great resource. I think the issue that we face with that, though, is the policy that needs to come in and match it, like instruct. Because a lot
Right.
of times you'll have a in the issue where we had the young man, the father that was a pastor. I was trying to get his name because I do want to say his name, but it was a father that was a pastor, and he was in mental health crisis. He'd lost his job, and they called for assistance with having him to calm, because there he is. Okay. And his name was Patrick Warren Sr. He's out of Texas here, Killeen, Texas. And he was in mental health crisis. His family called for assistance and help with him, asked not to have the
Mm-hmm.
police officers sent out. And they sent a mental health resource officer out who was able to calm him and get him to go to the hospital with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he wound up back at home, which is another concern. You know, if he was able to, you know, receive, you know, kind and compassionate assistance once he arrived at the hospital. And this is where you and I talked about residential treatment centers, you know,
Mm-hmm.
someplace
Yes.
that helps them to stabilize and feel like
Right.
they're humanized and sit
Right.
and be able to, you know, stabilize and not go
Mm-hmm.
back out immediately into the community with no resource. And this man went home, and the next day they called for a resource officer, and instead of them following protocol on 911, they sent an officer out, and this man
Mm-hmm.
lost his life. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that when we have, you know, the number be implemented, you know, nationally, that they also follow up with policy that instructs,
Right.
not only
Right.
instructs, but has, you know, um, some form of repercussion that can happen for operating outside those, you know, parameters. So I
Right.
really think that's a great point that you mentioned, and I agree. I'm all for mental health education. Lastly, you have a podcast.
Yes, I do.
Can you
Caregiver
please
team.
tell us how that can be a resource?
Yes. So I started the podcast. I started my business in general because actually, I don't know if she's on here, but I was in support group, and um, I was to my sister. I don't know if she's on here. I was telling her that I just felt like there needed to be just more resources, more help, more. something. And so my sister, she started telling me, you know so much, you can help so many people. And I was like, I don't know how to start a business, but I've just always, it's in my DNA. My mom says since I was 5 years old, I just always have loved to help people. And so one day I was in support group, and someone was crying, and then I started crying, and I just wanted to hug them. I just wanted to help them. And so that's how this created, and one of the reasons is because as a registered nurse, I know how to get in there and find the answers and make phone calls and do all that stuff. And most people don't. And I've studied, my mom is elderly now. She had a stroke. I know what a stroke is. I know what mental illness is. I know what dementia is. I know what cancer is. I know what all these things are and how to help people and how to find resources. But the average person does not. And so it was just in me that I just wanted to help people. And so I started this business. I started the podcast. My podcast, a lot of times it's me talking, and I'm just sharing my lived experiences, something I've been through or something that I feel like will be helpful to people. But I also have guest speakers on there. Last year I had a therapist and one of the county family advocates on there talking about bipolar. My sister, who's a Reiki coach, she was on one time, and we talked about, I had this fun thing happen to me in my yoga class about smiling. And so we talked about smiling and endorphins and things like that. I had the family advocate came on again, and she has a loved one with a mental illness. She talked about that. And then for Caregivers Month, I had four caregivers on there, and they were caregivers of four different different things. So one of them had a son who's autistic, one had a son who had mental illness, one had a family member with cancer, one's mom had Alzheimer's. And the reason I wanted to bring them on there with all of these different chronic illnesses is to let the caregiver know that it doesn't matter the illness. We as a caregiver, we struggle with the same things. We have the same challenges. And so that's why the community of caregivers is so helpful, because we all share the same struggles. And so we can help each other. And so I wanted all four caregivers to have a different experience as far as the illness, that their loved one was taken care of, but then talk about what it is to be a caregiver, so that people could just see the similarities and know that we're not alone, that we can reach out to other people and be there for each other. And so this year, the podcast, I'm going to continue doing the same thing. I'll be on talking, sharing. We're also going to have guests. One of my guests last year too, I forgot to say, was a pharmacist, a psychiatric pharmacist, and she talked about different medications and stuff. And it was so funny, because I was like so into her talk, I would forget that I was the one hosting it and forget to ask her questions. It was just so interesting. It just kind of, the way she broke everything down, the difference between psychotropic medications and mood stabilizers and just all that. Even though I knew all that, like the way that she broke it down, like I was learning a lot. So I'm hoping to have her back, because we had a lot of listeners who sent in questions, and she actually so the podcast is not live, it's recorded, but they sent in their questions ahead of time, and she was able to actually answer them. So this year, same thing. We're going to have a lot of guests on the podcast. If anybody out there listening, if you have any topics you would like to see discussed, let me know.
Can you give us an email? Can you give an email, or how would you like
for
them
the
to contact
podcast?
you?
So my web page is in maintenance mode right now, so they can send me a direct message on Instagram at Caregivers Haven. And actually, while I'm giving you that information, they can go to Instagram at Caregivers Haven. Also, I'm going to be a guest speaker. There's going to be a family caregiver conference coming up the first week of February, and that I'll be a guest speaker. And so if you go to my Instagram, or actually if you go to Solo, it's solo.to/Caregivers Haven.
Was that T as in Tom or P as in Paul?
T as in Tom. Okay. Yeah. The link for the conference is on there.
Okay. So
and also the link for my podcast. It's like a link tree, so they're both on there.
So I have Solo, Sam O, Larry O, Tom Caregivers Haven.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
That's correct. Uh-huh.
And that's the link to the Caregiver Conference. That's going
Yes.
to be virtual?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know about that one. That's a good
Yeah.
resource.
Yeah. And so the podcast is, the purpose of it is to educate and also to be a resource for caregivers, just to let them know they're not alone. We all,
Right.
a lot of times people think, oh, this is only happening in my house, and it's like, no, we're all
So you
we're all
got a
going through a
corner
lot
of
of different
torture.
things.
Yes.
Yeah. Whether it's a loved one with a stroke or cancer or ALS or, mental health, whatever it is. And so, so my podcast is to inform people things that I find out about, educate when I have professionals come on, and just be a resource to just listen to when they're struggling.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. Shoot, I got some resources out of that for myself. Is there anything else you would like to share, Saundra?
No, the biggest thing is caregivers need to understand about self-care and asking for help. And if they feel like they're alone, they're not alone. You can DM me if you have questions. If you're struggling with something, I can try to, help you find the answer. And also to just reach out for support. Like, say that you're someone at home by yourself and all your family lives out of state and you don't have anyone for help. There are social workers, there are support groups, there are national organizations who can help you. And so, and you need to learn to, if your family member had a stroke or heart attack, there's American Heart Association. If they have kidney disease, there's a kidney organization. There are places that you can go for help. And, I'm going to be honest. I never really believed in support groups or thought support groups were helpful. And I would hear, I remember when I was younger, I hear people who were going to like AA meetings and they were like, oh, they don't help. And I just never knew. But it's like, how can you say you don't like something if you never tried it? Right. And so the first night I went to support group, I couldn't even talk. I was so tore up. Like every time I tried to say something, I was just so full and I couldn't talk because I was going to cry. I kept crying. Not I was going to cry. I kept crying every time I would say a word. And all it wasn't like it was something so, big that they were doing. It was just hearing other people who have the same struggle that I have. Hearing that these things that are going on in my house is not just at my house, hearing that my mother is not the only one running down the street, just like it like, and when we were growing up, and even though I'm a registered nurse, we just learned to survive, with my mom. We never had help. We never went to support group. We never had anything. And so when I started taking care of, my other family member 8 years ago, and I started learning all of this and going to support groups, I was just like, man, I wish we had known this 50 years ago when we first started helping my mom. Man, I wish I had known about, all of these things. And so I just, if you're out there and you're a caregiver and you don't think support groups you don't think they work, I'm telling you, I was the same way, but they are so helpful. And then, that's another community that you have, and maybe, you've been trying to figure out how to get your family member to take their medication. Maybe someone in that group can give you some different ideas. And sometimes we're so caught up in caring for our loved one. Like, I know for me, like, I forget, what brings me happiness or what brings me calm. And I remember, and sometimes it's like little simple things. One night I was in a support group and I was just telling them, I just turned all the lights out in the house and lit some scented candles, and I just sat there and meditated, and I just felt so much better. And someone was like, oh, I should try that. Oh my gosh, I never thought about that. And so like, that's so simple. We might think that that's so simple, but someone else hadn't thought about it. And it was helpful for them. And they came back later and actually told me it was helpful for them. And so, and I've learned things from other people. So I would just really, really encourage all the caregivers to join a support group, find a support group for whatever illness that their loved one has.
Right. I think that's a great resource because me, you know, and my family, we, you know, at the beginning, you just don't know what you don't know, and then you can really feel like you just have that corner of torture on the market corner, like it's only happening at your
Mhm.
house. And to
Right.
meet other caregivers, and especially for my husband, you know, as Black men, you know, that there's not a lot of representation openly there. So
Hmm.
having and to come into a environment where there's not just you, and able to see, oh yeah, you know, oh, there are other men that are, you know, experiencing this too, that, you know, worry about their family. Oh, there are other, you know, moms and grandmas, and, you know, it's just, community is such a big deal, especially within mental health, because it's not always viewed as a health issue, you know. And within the Black community, sometimes it's considered a spiritual issue. You know, in many places, still people are still struggling with seeing it as a, you know, as a legitimate health issue. And so, you know, going into support group, talking with other caregivers, and it, I mean, there's so many resources that you can come across in there. I've met people who've been able to give advice on how to get your loved one, what do you call that? Um, I, is it SSI? I can't remember, but help, you know,
Hmm.
financial
Hmm.
help for them, and the
Hmm.
ways to, you know, phone numbers that can get you in quicker to call people. You know, you just never know who you're going to meet in those meetings. And there are so many people who are professionals and go to work and sitting next to you every day at work, and you never know that they're caregivers too, but they work in a capacity where they can offer resources that you may not even know exist. So
Right.
that's just, to me, that's a wealth of resource that you can add to your caregiver toolbox by, you know, going to support meetings, going to
Right.
group meetings. So, well, I thank you so much for accepting
You're
the
very
invitation
welcome.
to come
Thank you for
on.
having me.
Oh, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. And I'm gonna post some talk notes after, and I'll also send you a copy of the live here.
Okay. All
Okay,
right.
and thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. And I'll be looking forward to continuing to talk to you offline about some things too.
All right. Yep. I'm sure we have a lot of collabing to do.
Oh yeah,
You sound as passionate as I do about helping
yes,
people. So,
yes. Thank you, Saundra.
okay.
And
You're
if you
welcome.
you're thank you. If you're watching this as a replay, thank you for staying until this point, and you can check the posts next to this post for talk notes and links. And thank you so much for coming in, and we'll see you on the next Well Caregiver Wednesday talk series next Wednesday. Thank you, Sandra. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye bye.